move to the north of the Awali River. Save your lives. On Wednesday, the Israeli Defense Forces announced the death of 8 of their soldiers inside Lebanon. The Israeli military claims it has killed 15 members of Hezbollah in an overnight airstrike. Significantly, it has also announced that 3 months ago, it killed 3 senior Hamas leaders in Gaza, including Ravi Mushtaha, the head of the Hamas government in the Gaza Strip. The IDF says they were hiding in an underground compound in northern Gaza and were killed by airstrikes. Meanwhile, Hezbollah has said Israeli forces attempted to advance at the Fatima border crossing but were confronted by its fighters. The Fatima gate has remained closed since Israeli troops withdrew from Lebanon in 2000. Hezbollah has also announced that it has fired more rockets on Israel, targeting an Israeli settlement in the country's north as well as a military outpost, saying the attacks are in support of Palestinians in Gaza and in response to the brutal Israeli aggression. The IDF has announced it is sending an additional division to participate in its ground war in Lebanon, while reiterating that the campaign is limited, localized and targeted. For the people of Lebanon, however, it's been one night of terror after another. What scared many in downtown Beirut is that for the first time, a missile strike targeted a building in a central part of the city. The target was a building that a former parliament member of Hezbollah was living in. It's also the headquarters for a medical center affiliated to Hezbollah. The building is located in an area that was considered a safe zone up till now due to its Christian majority population. But now, with every passing day, any feeling of safety is fast vanishing in all parts of Beirut. Thousands of people are fleeing Lebanon as Israel carries out its heaviest bombardment of the country since 2006. Scores of flights carrying Lebanese citizens escaping the Israeli airstrikes have arrived in Cyprus. Hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced in the country in recent weeks amid the latest conflict, including more than 100,000 people, mostly Lebanese and Syrians, who have fled across the border into Syria, according to the United Nations. Israel's strikes have killed more than 1,000 people in Lebanon and displaced about 1 million residents since it escalated its war with Hezbollah. The devastating Israeli strikes against Hezbollah have given Israel the upper hand as it edges towards a direct confrontation with the militant group's backers in Iran. Israel's assassination of Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah and multiple heavy hits to the militia over the past 2 weeks have signaled a tectonic shift in regional power dynamics, say experts. Some of them argue, now that Israel has decapitated Hezbollah and greatly degraded it, it feels Hezbollah is no longer a major threat, and therefore it is now focused on going after Iran itself. And that tectonic shift is one where Iran no longer has the balance of power or balance of deterrence between Iran and Israel. Now, in the aftermath of Tuesday night's Iranian missile attack on Israel, the Israeli War Cabinet is weighing its response. Iran launched a salvo of about 200 ballistic missiles at Israeli military targets, sending sirens blaring across Israel and activating the country's sophisticated defense systems. Iran's military chief has warned of broader strikes if Israel retaliates. People in Tehran are on edge and fears of a wider all-out war between the two regional military powerhouses are growing. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has termed the attack a big mistake by Iran, saying it will pay for it. Israel's UN ambassador, Danny Danon, has said the Israeli response will be a very strong and painful one, and it will be soon. US President Joe Biden has said he does not support a potential Israeli attack on Iranian nuclear sites. Asked whether Israel is heeding the US president's message that Iran's nuclear sites should not be targeted, the Israeli envoy to the United Nations has said it should be the responsibility of the US and other Western democracies to block Iran from achieving nuclear capabilities, otherwise it will be too late. Meanwhile, Lebanon's foreign minister Abdullah Abu Habib has claimed that Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah had actually agreed to a 21-day ceasefire just days before he was assassinated by Israel. The temporary ceasefire was called for by US President Joe Biden, his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron and other allies during last week's UN General Assembly. There are many who say the United States' ability to control Israel's military strategy is quite limited, even as US officials are calling for a de-escalation in Israel's growing conflict with Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. This despite the fact that the United States is Israel's most important ally and biggest supplier of arms. In the days after Hamas's 7th October attack on Israel, there were widespread fears of a regional war. Many said the conflict would not be contained within Gaza. Hezbollah would attack Israel from the north, the Houthis from Yemen, and Iranian proxies from Iraq. Israel would be forced to respond. It would come into direct conflict with Iran, and a much wider war would erupt. Nearly 1 year later, all those things have come to pass. A day after Iran launched its largest ever ballistic missile attack on Israel, and as Israeli troops battle Hezbollah fighters on the ground in Lebanon, the regional war that the world was fearing is effectively upon us. In the wake of the assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, Netanyahu had said, and I quote, "The elimination of Nasrallah is a necessary condition in achieving the objectives we have set, returning the residents of the north safely to their homes and changing the balance of power in the region for years to come." 2 days later, Netanyahu directly addressed the people of Iran, saying, "When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different." Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett is among those strongly pushing for a maximalist position. He argues that Iran's two arms to fight Israel, Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, are temporarily paralyzed. So it's like a boxer out in the ring without arms for the next few minutes. Now's the time that we can attack because Iran is fully vulnerable. He added, "It's time to neutralize the whole axis of evil. We started with Hamas, then Hezbollah. It's now time for Iran, maybe even Syria." Of course, such a response carries with it the danger of the unknown. Hezbollah is weakened, but no one knows how much capacity it still has. The US government believes that Iran could build a bomb in just weeks once it decides to do so. Short of the nuclear option, Tehran has other ways of applying further pressure on Israel and its allies. Escalating responses could spiral completely out of control and drag allies like the United States into the conflict.
These fishermen in Lebanon's Sidon leave for work with no idea whether they'll make it home. Israeli strikes continue to target the southern Lebanese city, but not going to work is not an option.
We are particularly scared of this battleship. They were hitting the port. But we are unable to stop working. Each one of us has 4 or 5 children.
Displaced people have been flocking to shelter in Sidon, says fisherman Hassan Shaban.
Every house has around 10 to 15 families. All the displaced are now in the old town of Sidon. It's packed. All the families from Tyre and from here and there. Everyone is here in Old Sidon. But what can we do? We need to be able to live. We are working while they are striking. Yesterday night was very intense.
More than 1,900 people have been killed and over 9,000 wounded in Lebanon in almost a year of cross-border fighting. Most of the deaths occurred in the past 2 weeks, according to Lebanese government statistics. Caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati said about 1.2 million Lebanese had been displaced by Israeli attacks.
The security of the region is the security of all Muslims, and we do not want any war or bloodshed. Since I assumed the presidency, every speech I've made has emphasized our quest for peace and security. No nation or region can prosper in the midst of war. We were left with no choice but to respond. If Israel decides to retaliate, then it will face harsher reactions.
So far, the total toll since the start of the attacks is 1,974 martyrs, including 127 children and 261 women. Concerning the wounded, 9,384 have fallen so far, and these are those who are being treated. These numbers are as of dawn today.
All right. On that note, let's take a quick break here on Global Lens, but don't go anywhere. On the other side, we're going to discuss with our panel of experts just what Israel might do next and what can we expect as tensions continue to escalate in the Middle East.
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience.
PM Modi is the first ever Indian Prime Minister to visit Ukraine. His visit comes 2 years after around 17,000 Indian students were safely evacuated amidst the Russia-Ukraine war under his leadership. Watch Airlift, the story of how the evacuations unfolded, only on the News9 Plus app.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
In the heart of New York, an Indian spectacle unfolds. Step into the world of the elite saga, featuring influential Indians who've rocked the globe. From culinary geniuses,
this has been nothing less than a dream,
to the wisdom of sages.
And which is why success can never be spelt without you.
Discover the stories behind the stars. Experience the magic behind the scenes. At the first Indian event at the Statue of Liberty. Watch the Elite Saga, streaming only on News9 Plus. Download now.
This is such a huge, vibrant, exciting country to be in. Every day brings a new adventure. I absolutely love it. India is now a major priority for us to engage with. You have to remember, Ireland, we're a very small country of 5 million people. We have a huge diaspora. We can talk about that later. Many, many Irish people around the globe. The Indian government is always very thorough with any proposal. They don't just sign up to everything. So of course there has to be benefits for both sides, but I really see huge opportunities in that.
This is The Diplomat.
On News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the escalating tensions in the Middle East. Let's introduce our panel. Joining me on Global Lens tonight is Dr. Wael Awad, strategic affairs expert, somebody who understands West Asia better than most others. Lieutenant General Rameshwar Yadav, defense and strategic expert, is also with us. And in a moment, in fact, I'm told we also have now Ambassador Suresh Goyal, former Indian diplomat. A very warm welcome to all my guests. Dr. Wael Awad, let me begin with you. As I said, you understand this region better than most others. What is your assessment, sir, of what is happening in West Asia at the moment? You know, for months now, a lot of us have been asking, is an all-out regional war going to erupt in the Middle East? But given the cycle of attack and revenge that's already underway between these two regional powerhouses, Iran and Israel, and also sworn enemies, do you not believe that that much dreaded regional war is already upon us in some ways?
Well, thank you very much for your compliment. I'm sure you're having two distinguished panelists who are more senior and more knowledgeable in the region than me. But I have to say my word here that in the absence of a comprehensive political framework in solving the Palestinian crisis in the Middle East, we are continuing to have a war because the military might, that they may think that it can solve the problem and deny the existence of one party against the other. It is not going to solve the current crisis in the Middle East. Having said that, I would say the crisis in the Middle East, Neha, is not today, and you know it has been since 1948 with the establishment of Israel. They had divided Palestine into two, 55% giving to the minority Jew and 45% was given to the Arabs. They refused it, and the fight continued, and Israel continued to fight and expand and take land, and saying that it is a victim of the countries who are not wanted peace. But I think when we went for peace with the Israelis in 1992, we went to Madrid conference. Then Israel broke a deal with the Palestinian, which is called the Oslo Agreement, that they give them 5-year interim period before the formation of a government of Palestine. Then Jordan also had the same deal with Israelis. Prior to these two, Camp David was with Sadat. None of these peace deals have reached because still nobody addressed the Palestinian problem of having their own homeland coexisting side by side with the Israelis. So Netanyahu came in 1992. He torn the Oslo Agreement. He looked at the Ishaq Rabin and told him there is no question of a Palestinian state. An activist from his supporter went and assassinated the former Prime Minister of Israel, and the fight continued till date. So this cycle of violence is a very dangerous, and we are at the brink of a regional war, which could break and could bring the whole region into a catastrophe. Not only the global oil and trade, but also the global peace and security. Because now, with the tit for tat and the kind of reaction and action and reaction from Israel and Iran, can bring this region to a brink of a war and could affect all the country, not only the Iranian installation where Israel is aiming at targeting. I think most of the Gulf countries are worried that this war will spread to their angle, and India will be among the most of the country who depend on the oil from this side will suffer with the upsurge of the oil prices. So therefore, I see there is a lack of international commitment or willingness to end this war.
International commitment or willingness to end this war. Very interesting point, and I also want to dwell a little later on the show on the diplomatic impotence that the United States seems to have displayed in the last 1 year. There are two different schools of thought on this. There are those who believe that the United States' influence in the region has significantly diminished, which is why Netanyahu just doesn't seem to care about what Washington has to say, or the United States is happily looking the other way and letting Netanyahu do whatever the hell he wants to do. I will come back to you, Dr. Awad, to discuss that in greater detail, but you're quite right. The situation we're faced with currently couldn't be more dangerous and precarious. We are on the brink of an all-out regional war, one which is going to impact global peace and security, not just the nations directly involved. Lieutenant General Rameshwar Roy, let me bring you in, sir. There is no doubt the situation is very serious and precarious. In your assessment, how far do you believe Israel would be willing to go, as it seems to have sniffed blood, shall I say that? You know, because it believes it has significantly weakened Hamas in Gaza, it has decapitated Hezbollah in Lebanon, taken out half of its leadership in the last 2 weeks, including its chief. Now it probably believes that it can go after the very power that had unleashed these entities as its proxies on Israel for all these years and decades. Do you believe Israel actually senses a real opportunity here to deliver a knockout blow to Iran? Do you believe it can go as far as to attack Iran's nuclear sites, something that President Biden is telling Netanyahu not to do? How much worse do you believe this could get?
You see, Neha, let me tell you at the start of the conversation or my comment itself, that both the sides, Israel as well as the Iran and its proxies, they are going into this war, this conflict in a very, very calibrated manner. Now, let's not forget that Iran also has the kind of nuclear capabilities that should deter Israel to go ahead and destroy or think of destroying the Iranian nuclear facilities, as was the case a couple of years back. And let's also not forget that Iran has now got much stronger connections with Russia as well as with China. That is point one. The point two is that earlier speaker was very right in saying that there appears to be no political framework, either with Israelis who have gone into a conflict or with the rest of the world, United States included. Without a political framework, you cannot plan a proper strategy to, it is called exit strategy, to come out of this kind of a situation in which now Israel and Iran with its proxies are locked into. The point number three is United Nations have already been made totally irrelevant. This is very unfortunate. Because if you do not care for the international opinion and you think all by yourself, you can resolve an issue of this nature, which has got or spill over into the entire West Asia region, then you could be going wrong and you may not be achieving your purpose. In fact, you may be derailing your long-term interests if you pursue this single-mindedly in a manner that Israel is trying to do. Now, let's also not forget that we already have a conflict going on between Ukraine and Russia. We have the American elections round the corner next month. I do not think that anything is going to escalate into much bigger scale, at present at least, for a couple of months. This will continue to have these kind of more to do with the warfare in words and statements, getting aggressive. And this continuation of Iran, its proxies, along with the kind of calibration that they have gone into with missiles and drones. In fact, let's not forget that this is one of the first examples which can be quoted subsequently, that how even the proxies can be pushed up to have a very high level of involvement in a conflict like this, which earlier the nations believed that could only be by the non-state actors in terms of terrorist actions. This is a full-fledged war being fought. Israel on one side, Iran and its proxies in Lebanon in terms of Hezbollah, in Iraq, in Syria, in Houthis in Yemen, and all these proxies together are now pitted against Israel. Yes, Israel has got enough war material in terms of the kinetic power it possesses, but that alone is not a decider for any conflict. That alone is not going to give them the aims. I do not know for sure what war aims or political aims they have in mind, but definitely without a political framework, we cannot expect any outcome or a conclusion of this present conflict which is going on. It may not directly impact many of the countries, but its indirect fallouts are plentiful, particularly in terms of economics and particularly in terms of the other nations which are watching from a sideline, taking sides. And as we are now reading to a great extent, large number of nations globally are not really on the side of Israel, except for maybe very, very strongly US is on their side, which they have got.
One has to agree with you there. However, the trouble is Israel just doesn't seem to care about international opinion. I think it has faced international isolation for months now. But when it doesn't even care about what its staunchest ally, the United States, has to say, well, you know, I don't think any other countries or entities' opinion matters to Israel. And, you know, you talked about the toothlessness and the ineffectiveness of bodies like the United Nations. Well, things have come to such a pass where UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has been declared persona non grata by Israel. They call him a blot on the United Nations. That's how bitter things are. But let me now take this to Ambassador Suresh Goyal. Ambassador Goyal, you know, I want to quote for our viewers and you what former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has said. And he's being widely quoted everywhere. He is one of those who is pushing for a maximalist position on the ongoing conflict. And he says Iran's two arms to fight Israel, Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, are temporarily paralyzed. So it's like a boxer out in the ring without arms for the next few minutes. Now is the time that we can attack because Iran is fully vulnerable. It is time to neutralize the whole axis of evil. We started with Hamas, then Hezbollah. It is now time for Iran. Do you believe that even the current establishment in Israel, led by a very hawkish Netanyahu, could be thinking on these lines, that they have decided it is time to go all out against Iran, whatever the consequences may be?
Neha, before I answer your question, I have a question for you. You quoted to me the former Israeli Prime Minister Bennett. have you ever heard any other statement of complete hatred amongst each other? When you basically say that they are a blot on the face of civilization, they question Iran, they question everything that is in the area. I'm saying that basically because if you want to understand what is happening in the Middle East, and that's very, very dismal really for me. I've lived practically 10 years in the area. And my friend, while I agree with him, because we both feel for the region really in that sense. And let me just come back really here with 2 or 3 things. Number one, I recall my own days in Egypt, and I had gone to Jerusalem, and that happened to be the day of Good Friday. And Neha, I was standing at the square very close to Al-Aqsa Mosque, and you had these 3 processions coming from Al-Aqsa Mosque after having said their Friday prayers. We had this procession of Jews who were actually coming back from the wall of the veil, the wall of veil, where they had been there because that was the Friday and that's the day of the Sabbath. And they had gone to their post, everything, etc., etc. And they came from the other side, from the wall of the veil. And we had the Christians coming from the church, I forget the name, I think Sepulchre really, and Bethlehem. And they had said their prayers, Friday prayers, and they were coming back. Neha, you wouldn't believe it, the tension was so high in the air. You could see the hatred in the eyes of each other for the other community. Now, I come from India, and therefore, for me, this kind of an ethnic or the religious or the racial, whatever you want to call it, that hatred is very, very abnormal. I don't live with it. But I saw for the first time what the hatred for communities could actually mean. I was afraid. That is how it was. And therefore, that when I was reading an editorial today in one of the newspapers, where it said that the peace the people are looking for in the Middle East, not the peace of living together, but the surrender of others. Israel wants surrender of Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran wants surrender of Israel. And that's a kind of a situation we have. So therefore, my comment is going to be really simple. Unless people begin to accept each other and they begin to be able to live with each other, I don't think we can have permanent peace in the region, come what may. And that is what is happening now. I would like to call it, maybe it is the ultimate war between the communities. I have been to St. Catherine, where again confluence of 3 communities there, and they fought with each other. This has been happening for centuries, if not millennia. And I'm rather actually pessimistic that even after millennia have passed, things don't seem to have changed.
You're quite right.
My therefore one, yes.
Go ahead.
My therefore one statement here would be that here, unless both Iran and Israel, and when I say Iran, I mean Iran, the proxies, are able to understand how they can live with each other, I don't think we can have, at least at this time now, any kind of peace with the kind of stability or the uncertainty, in the USA we have because of the elections, with the kind of situation we have in the Middle East, Asia, and Europe being what it is. Therefore, we have to wait and see now how the parties, basically Israel and Iran, react to each other. That's the only way it will define or bring about or talk about peace really, whether there is peace or not. We have to wait for them to react.
And these are the only 2 countries that can de-escalate the situation. No one else can do that. And you're quite right, sir. It is very, very hard to be optimistic about peace in the region right now. And thanks for sharing that story with us about your personal experience, how scary it was for you to be in that environment that was filled with so much hatred amongst communities. I need to take a quick break here on Global Lens. We'll continue this conversation with our guests on the other side.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface, but not the living people?
Joe Biden is not going to be the Democratic presidential nominee.
I made my choice. Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds, predators. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
I am the one saving democracy.
He has tapped into the fear and anxiety about demographic change in the US.
This polarization in the United States. Some people are even suggesting that there could be a civil war.
You are this unable to solve your own domestic problems. You have no right to claim to be anybody else in the world. And we're moving into a multipolar world where the United States will not lead.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
This is such a huge, vibrant, exciting country to be in. Every day brings a new adventure. I absolutely love it. India is now a major priority for us to engage with. You have to remember, Ireland, we're a very small country of 5 million people. We have a huge diaspora. We can talk about that later. Many Irish people around the globe. The Indian government is always very thorough with any proposal. They don't just sign up to everything. So of course there has to be benefits for both sides, but I really see huge opportunities in that.
This is The Diplomat.
On News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the escalating conflict in the Middle East and what may come next. Let me go back to Dr. Wael Awad at this point. Dr. Awad, I want to ask you two questions. This came up in the earlier segment. Do you believe Iran's nuclear capabilities would be in any way a deterrent for Israel? Because many are discussing what Israel may do next, and it is widely believed that it could in fact go ahead and strike some of Iran's nuclear facilities, even if Joe Biden does not want them to do that. Do you believe this is any kind of deterrence for Israel? Number one. Number two, you know, as the ambassador pointed out in the earlier segment, as much as this conflict that has gone on for decades now is about statehood and identity and maybe survival itself, isn't, you know, the root of it also religious hatred to a very large extent?
Thank you. I think the first question is the nuclear facilities of Iran. Till date, Iran have said it has a civilian purpose. But Israel wanted to destroy the Iranian nuclear facilities because they think that they're suspecting that Iran may be having, you know, an ambition to have a nuclear bomb. But any attack by Israelis on the Iranian nuclear side, definitely Iran will change its option and go nuclear, and nobody can stop them that time. Then they will do it. This is one of the issues which I think the Iranians are rethinking of their doctrine not to have a nuclear weapon. Israel, at the other hand, have the nuclear weapon, and is Iran having the ballistic missile and can hit precisely at the Daymuma nuclear site of Israel, where there is more than 100 nuclear heads developed by Israel are there, undeclared nuclear state. We all know that. Nobody question Israel nuclear capabilities in this part of the world, and only they talk of other country which is hoping that they may go, whether it is Iran, whether it was Iraq they created, or whether it was Libya. So all that story goes on. That just shows the hypocrisy of the West. But I think any attack on this, Neha, will have a devastating impact on the Arab world, because Israel now, among the right-wing people, actually the political leadership is calling the war, and they're legitimizing the military solution. So if they go for a tactical nuclear weapon using against Iran, then I think, as I said, it is a total third world war will break up in this region, where Russia, with China, where the American will step in, and nobody going to be safe at this stage. I know that it is sound hypothetically unrealistic, but it can happen. But I think military people, like our general on the panel, he will answer me if I am wrong, that this is a war. Nobody knows the outcome of this war, because we don't know what arsenal both sides have been packing and keeping for long, long years to have it there. So I think this is one of the issues which is going to be a problem. The second problem, and I fully agree with Ambassador in this point, and he knows we lived in this, it's not the hatred. It is actually the right-wing evangelist, right Christians, evangelists who had come from the United States, the Jewish Zionists who had come, the settlers came to this part of the world, and they destroyed the harmony among the people. Jerusalem is important for Christians, important for Muslim, important for the Jew. It's all of them together. We live together. In fact, if you go back in 1995, we had the Oslo Agreement and the 1992, and there was a 55% of the Israeli society wanted to have peace with the Arabs. Now it's only 5%. And I'm with the 5% actually, because we want peace in this region. We want to coexist. And Israelis acknowledge, even the Chacham of Israel, even the religious leader of all the Israelis says and acknowledge that the Jew had the only safe custody among the Islam. It wasn't in Europe. In Europe, they were prosecuted. They were expelled from each and every city for a millennium. And we know that. Everybody knows it is historically done. And then the Holocaust come where they push them. And in fact, Germany bear the main responsibility, Hitler time, not only for the Holocaust, but by sending the poor Jew into Palestine on the name that they are being killed. And even the Mufti of Al-Quds, Jerusalem, Al-Husseini, wrote a strong letter to Hitler those years, and it is in the archive of the UK, that you have sent Jews to Palestine with the Nazi flag on it. So what was really happening then? Then there is a project. This project in this region is to deny the Palestinian their right of existence, to deny the Palestinian their homeland, and that is not a land without people. It is a people with the land. And I think if we don't address the Palestinian issue, there is no peace in the Middle East.
And well, that is where the problem lies, because Israel just doesn't want to recognize the two-state solution. What else can we really do to address this situation? But coming back to the present circumstances, Lieutenant General Rameshwar Roy, you know, a lot of us who don't quite understand what's really happening in this military theater, a lot of us seem to actually feel that we are on the brink of World War III, and we can perhaps be forgiven for harboring that feeling, however alarmist this may sound, because that is really how dangerous the situation appears to be. But I want to ask you this question. Do you believe that, you know, Israel would want to go ahead only with a calibrated response to ensure that this cycle of attack and revenge stops without causing too much harm or damage? Or do you believe that it may have decided to go all out in its war against Iran because it believes that Iran is really the mothership of all the proxies that it has been fighting for years and decades now? Now, the problem is, however calibrated your response you may think it is, however well prepared you may think you are, in a warfare, calculations can go horribly wrong. We don't know how Hezbollah is placed today. We don't know what kind of a position Iran truly is in today. Do you believe there is that real danger of Israeli calculations going horribly wrong?
Neha, I don't think so. War, whatever it may appear on the surface, the process of waging a war and process of coming out with the grand strategy and strategy that you lay out for in the beginning of the war is such that all these implications would have been already well thought out. First of all, let's believe that earlier, if it was the entire Arab world against Israel and went into two big wars inside 1967 and 1973 Arab-Israel conflict, today it is again a similar issue of leadership. Leadership means earlier, if it was the Arab world which was trying to take a leadership in this region, then for a long time, Americans had filled up the gap in West Asia. Today, it is a question of Iran, which is trying to take the leadership of this area. And that is one good reason why Iran has been able to, over the years, strengthen the proxies of Hezbollahs in Lebanon and other forces which are having allegiance with Iran or with the backing of Iran. They have become quite a force to reckon with in Iraq, Syria, Houthis in Yemen, etc. Now, the issue here is that it is this calibration that I spoke of. It depends from both the sides. Israelis are also fully aware of the reactions and the responses that Iran is going to offer. And Iran themselves, to me, it appears that their leadership as of now is looking at the domestic compulsions that they have, because within themselves, they are not very cohesive right now. And second aspect is that they are also looking at the escalation that might occur with the reactions that they will offer to Israel. So when I said that this calibration will not allow the entire world to get sucked into this, even the world is watching. And when I say world is also watching, that includes the other big powers besides United States, which is Russia and China. Nobody is going to gain from a bigger conflict in this region, even if the conflict remains restricted to this small region alone. It has got much bigger fallouts in terms of instability that is going to cause. Therefore, the world as such is going to come together to put restraint on both the sides to make sure that we don't slip into a bigger escalation called, within quotes, the Third World War. I'm very clear on this. That's not going to happen. This calibration, when I mentioned it, it is for both the sides. And when I mentioned it, it is for both the sides. And ultimately, at the end of this conflict, one has to understand, Israel has to understand, US has to understand, rest of the world has to understand that reality of Palestine has to be accepted at some point of time or the other. Israel always believes that by finishing up the Hamas and Hezbollahs, they will be able to absolutely obliterate the realities of Palestine. I do not think so. Palestine as a state has existed in this region. And if we want to be very fair, let's believe that, like Professor was mentioning earlier, Dr. Wad, that it is these people who have come as settlers. Now, if you grab the land and you have settled here, and other side has nearly accepted your presence, I see no reason why should you not accept their presence, regardless of how much of land you want to give them and how much of other restrictions you want to put on them. Therefore, the finishing of Hamas and Hezbollah, this is a foregone conclusion. Israel has already done that. I would say that if that was their aim, they have already achieved it. Now, if they think they can also finish off all the proxies of Iran in this region and finish them forever, I think that will be too big a aim, and that will be too, it's all sprinklings here and there. Identification of such targets become very, very difficult. And when you think that...
You're quite right, sir. But, the question that nobody seems to have an answer to is just what is Israel's end game? You know, I mean, if they believe they've broken the back of Hamas, they believe they've decapitated and degraded Hezbollah, what are they trying to do next? Finish off Iran? That's not going to happen. So what is the end game? What is the exit strategy? Is there an off-ramp that they're looking at? I think those remain unanswered questions, and those are some of the questions that also give rise to the fears that exist right now around the world, though it is very reassuring, I must say, to hear from a military man that we are not on the brink of World War III.
Absolutely not. That I can be very certain of it.
Okay.
Because, ultimately, world will realize, ultimately the pressure will come on Israel. Let's wait for November, next month are the elections. After this, I think some clarity will emerge on this issue as to what degree of support US is trying to give to Israel, what degree of restraint they want on them, because United Nations have been rendered absolutely irrelevant, and that is not a very good news for us.
That is not good news at all for the world. As we wrap up this discussion, Ambassador Suresh Goel, I'll give you the last word. The general there mentioned the American elections. Now, we all seem to believe that a lot rides on this election. The outcome could determine the course of the Russia-Ukraine war. It may also to some extent determine the course of what's happening in the Middle East. But I have a different question for you, which I have been putting to my panelists over the last few days. Why have we seen such spectacular diplomatic failure on part of the United States in the Middle East over the last 1 year? There are two schools of thought on this. One is it's America's sheer impotence and diminished influence, especially in this region, so much so that Netanyahu also doesn't care anymore about what the United States has to say, even if you refer to it as the sole superpower in the world today. The other school of thought is the Biden administration is only too happy to look the other way and let Netanyahu do what he wants to do while paying lip service to the cause of the Palestinian lives. Where do you weigh in
Neha,
on this?
did you say? Sorry, Neha, but did you say American impudence or American impotence?
I used to, actually it's not even my word. It is a lot of American analysts who are saying that American impotence it seems to be on display here.
Okay.
Whatever happened to the superpower?
See, the problem really here is that we depend so much on the Americans, the USA state, for the economy, political influence, strategic equations, and so on and so forth. We just can't seem to get out of it. But the problem is that everything comes to a stop in the USA when the elections take place, and therefore we have to wait till the elections are over and the new person is in charge, whether it is Kamala Harris or Trump, whoever it is, and then who will actually issue diktat that this is what they want. I'm sorry, I'm being rather dismissive of, or I'm being rather cynical of what happened in the US, but the fact is that the USA, because of their economic power, control the world. And that's where it is. But going beyond that, really, Americans may want whatever they want. The problem really here is going to be, are we prepared to allow the partners to really basically look each other in the eye and wait for them to surrender? Or are we going to allow them to think that, yes, we want to live in peace and we want to live together? Unfortunately, the way the situation is, that doesn't seem to be happening at all, really. And therefore, my own sense is that unless one or the other party comes back to their senses, we are in times of trouble. Neha,
I think you're right.
Sorry,
you're right. I won't call that pessimistic or cynical at all. I think that's realistic. I think we're all in a lot of trouble right now, and I have no idea who is going to bring the warring parties to their senses. Right now, they're simply not in the mood to listen. Of course, the situation continues to be very tense. This is a story we're going to track very closely here on Global Lens. And I would like to thank, on that note, all my guests, Dr. Wael Awad, Ambassador Suresh Goel, Lieutenant General Rameshwar Roy, for joining me on the show tonight. I look forward to having all of you back on Global Lens, and let's certainly hope we will not be discussing World War III then. Thanks very much for joining me on the show. All right, let's now turn our attention to another report that has emanated from the US but has had reverberations here in India. Rubbishing a report by a US federal government commission which has pointed to the alleged worsening of religious freedom in India and called for it being designated a country of particular concern, India's Ministry of External Affairs has termed it an attempt to peddle a motivated narrative. Responding to questions on the annual report by the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF, the ministry spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal said today, "Our views on this organization are well known. It's a biased organization with a political agenda. It continues to misrepresent facts and peddles a motivated narrative about India. We reject this malicious report, which only serves to discredit the organization further." Urging the commission to look within, the MEA spokesperson also said its time would be better spent addressing human rights issues in the United States. In the India section of its annual report, the USCIRF said misinformation and disinformation have been used to incite attacks against religious minorities and their places of worship in India. It also urged the US State Department to designate India as a country of particular concern for engaging in systematic, ongoing and egregious violations of religious freedom. The report highlights how throughout 2024, individuals have been killed, beaten and lynched by vigilante groups, religious leaders have been arbitrarily arrested, and homes and places of worship have been demolished. These events constitute particularly severe violations of religious freedom. That's what the Commission has said in its document. This isn't the first time, though, that the Commission has been accused by India of being biased or having a clear political agenda. Reacting to a report in May this year, which was released while India's parliamentary elections were underway, the MEA had said, "We really have no expectation that the USCIRF will even seek to understand India's diverse, pluralistic and democratic ethos. Their efforts to interfere in the largest electoral exercise in the world will never succeed." Okay, turning our attention now to the United States, where the presidential elections are just round the corner. Former US President and the Republican presidential nominee for the November election, Donald Trump, has an opponent to contend with at home. His wife, Melania Trump, has made an extraordinary declaration in an eagerly awaited memoir to be published next week. In this memoir, the former First Lady says she is a passionate supporter of a woman's right to control her own body, including the right to abortion. Amid a campaign in which Donald Trump's threats to women's reproductive rights have played a central role, the Republican nominee's wife writes, and I quote, "It is imperative to guarantee that women have autonomy in deciding their preference of having children based on their own convictions, free from any intervention or pressure from the government." Melania Trump goes on to say, "Why should anyone other than the woman herself have the power to determine what she does with her own body? A woman's fundamental right of individual liberty to her own life grants her the authority to terminate her pregnancy if she wishes. Restricting a woman's right to choose whether to terminate an unwanted pregnancy is the same as denying her control over her own body. I have carried this belief with me throughout my adult life," she says. Melania Trump has rarely expressed political views in public. The book, which reveals the former First Lady to be so firmly out of step with her own husband and his party, will be published in the United States next Tuesday. Melania's decision to include a full-throated expression of support for abortion rights is remarkable, not just because of her proximity to a Republican candidate who's running on an anti-abortion platform, but also given the severe deterioration of women's reproductive rights under Donald Trump and the GOP. In 2022, in the US Supreme Court case Dobbs versus Jackson, 3 justices installed by Donald Trump himself voted to strike down Roe v. Wade, the ruling which had protected federal abortion rights in the United States since 1973. Republican-run states have since instituted draconian abortion bans. Donald Trump has tried to take credit for the Supreme Court's decision, long the central aim of evangelical and conservative Catholic donors and voters. But Democrats have scored a succession of election wins by campaigning on this issue, even in conservative states, and threats to reproductive rights, among them threats to fertility treatments, including IVF, are proving to be rather problematic for Republicans. Amid a blizzard of statements which opponents deem misogynistic and regressive, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's running mate, has indicated he would support a national abortion ban, a move, it seems, his boss's wife would be strongly against. Finally, as we wrap up this edition of Global Lens, let's get you more news from the United States. One of two California doctors who were among the 5 people charged in the overdose death of Friends star Matthew Perry has pleaded guilty to a charge of illegally distributing the drug ketamine. The much-loved actor's sudden death, believed to have been caused by a drug overdose, left his global fans heartbroken and also opened a can of worms, exposing one of Hollywood's worst-kept secrets: rampant drug abuse and a vast network of peddlers who've made a fortune by preying on the addiction of many in the industry.
California doctor Mark Chavez, one of 5 people charged in the overdose death of Friends star Matthew Perry, pleaded guilty on Wednesday to illegally distributing ketamine. Chavez entered the plea in U.S. District Court in Los Angeles, where he admitted to obtaining ketamine with a fraudulent prescription written for another patient and acknowledged that the drug was intended for Perry. He could face up to 10 years in prison at his sentencing, which is scheduled for April. Another physician in the case, Dr. Salvador Plasencia, has pleaded not guilty, as has co-defendant Jasveen Sangha. Authorities say Sangha was an illicit supplier of the drug and was known as the ketamine queen. Chavez also acknowledged providing ketamine to Plasencia and that he understood it should only be administered under medical supervision with proper safety equipment nearby. According to court documents, Plasencia administered ketamine to Perry at the actor's home and supplied vials that were injected by his live-in assistant, Kenneth Ewamasa. Plasencia's lawyer has said his client properly prescribed and administered ketamine to Perry. Perry died last October from acute effects of ketamine and other factors that caused him to lose consciousness and drown in his hot tub, according to a December 2023 autopsy report. Chavez has relinquished his medical license and remains free on bond until his sentencing. He pleaded guilty under an agreement with prosecutors, who offered him lesser charges for his assistance in their case against Plasencia and Sangha.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
This is News9 Live, India's only digital exclusive live stream. For the early adopters, bringing you the news 24/7. For the smart audiences on the smartest TVs. News9 Live. Stream now on your smart TVs.
PM Modi is the first ever Indian Prime Minister to visit Ukraine. His visit comes 2 years after around 17,000 Indian students were safely evacuated amidst the Russia-Ukraine war under his leadership. Watch Airlift, the story of how the evacuations unfolded, only on the News9 Plus app.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Here are the top headlines today. The Supreme Court has wrapped the state governments of Punjab and Haryana for collecting just nominal compensation from farmers burning paddy stubble, leading to poor air quality in Delhi. The apex court also slammed the Commission for Air Quality Management for its failure to control stubble burning around the national capital. In one of the largest ever drug busts in the city, the Delhi police have seized nearly half a ton of cocaine and 40 kgs of marijuana valued at over 5,000 crores in the international market. The BJP has alleged that the mastermind behind the narco racket has links with the Congress party. The Enforcement Directorate has summoned former Indian cricket captain and Congress politician Mohammad Azharuddin for questioning in relation to alleged financial irregularities in the Hyderabad Cricket Association. Azharuddin, former president of the association, is accused of misappropriating funds during his tenure. The Supreme Court has stayed the Madras High Court order that sought a report from the Tamil Nadu police on all criminal cases registered against Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev's Isha Foundation. The Apex Court acted on a petition filed on behalf of the foundation by senior advocate Mukul Rohatgi. Telangana Minister Konda Sureka has apologized to actor Samantha Ruth Prabhu for her comments which claimed BRS leader K.T. Rama Rao was the reason behind her divorce with Naga Chaitanya. Surekha said her intention was to question K.T. Rama Rao's belittling attitude towards women and not to hurt anybody. A mob stormed a police station in Manipur's Ukhrul town and looted arms in the wake of a clash. 3 persons were killed and 20 injured in a gunfight that broke out between 2 groups over cleaning a disputed piece of land as part of the Swachhata Abhiyan on Gandhi Jayanti. Indian equity markets fell sharply, feeling the impact of escalating tensions in West Asia. Benchmark indices, the BSE Sensex and NSE Nifty 50 declined more than 1.5% each on the 3rd of October, resulting in losses of about 7 lakh crore as market capitalization. Israel bombed Beirut early on the 3rd of October, killing at least 6 people after its forces suffered their deadliest day on the Lebanese front in a year of clashes with Iran-backed Hezbollah. More than 1,900 people have been killed and over 9,000 wounded in Lebanon in almost a year of cross-border fighting. The Houthis have issued a warning to ship owners to prepare for frequent attacks. Since last November, they've launched nearly 100 attacks on vessels in the Red Sea, citing their support for Palestinians amid Israel's ongoing conflict in Gaza. The Houthi actions have resulted in the sinking of 2 merchant ships, the seizure of a 3rd, and the deaths of at least 4 seafarers. Israel has vowed to respond to the missile attack that Iran launched late on Tuesday. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned Tehran that it had made a big mistake. Now, Iran has said that any such retaliation will be met with an even tougher backlash. Now, these threats of retaliation against one another have pushed long-standing concerns over escalation towards a regional